Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Selden, and this is Indicators Forum. Dr. Lindsay Pollock and I are your co-hosts, and I'm going to let Lindsay introduce our guest today. Very special program for you about habits of mind.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Pollock, Provost at Sarasota University, and delighted to be here with you today. I have been a fan of Art and Bena's work for many years, and was so fortunate to meet them in person through my coach and mentor, Dr. Bill Summers. Dr. Summers has a working group of like-minded educators who are lifelong learners and always wanting to learn more. And I thank you, Bill, for the connection to Bena and Cart and Art. Excuse me, Art. Bena is an author, speaker, and educational consultant who has co-authored numerous books on habits of mind with Art Costa, including Students at the Center, Personalized Learning with the Habits of Mind. She is the co-founder and director of the Institute for Habits of Mind. Art Arthur Costa is professor emeritus at California State University, Sacramento, and past president of ASCD, author or editor of many foundational works on teaching for thinking, including The School as a Home for the Mind and Developing Minds. He is also co-founder and director of the Institute for Habits of Mind. We're delighted to have you both here today to enlighten us about strategies for leaders of all schools. Bill, would you like to add anything else before we turn it over to Bena and Art?
The only thing I would add is that these are two giants in the field of education, have strong commitment to kids, and I'm just grateful that I have an association, know them very well, and Art and I do things in Kauai. So other than that, I don't want to take any more time. I want people to have time with Ben and
Don't
Art.
why. That's
Thank
good
you,
news.
Bill. Thank you for jumping in this morning or this afternoon, wherever folks may
Yeah.
be. And I'll turn it over to you, Ben. I think you're driving the presentation today.
I am driving the cart. Right, Art? Okay.
Perfect.
Hello and welcome. We're so pleased that you are joining us for this session. And as Lindsay said, I'm Benna, and you heard about me. And I think Art might want to say a few words, and then we'll just give you an overview of where we're going in this session. And we're going to share a slideshow. So is that okay if I just get started with that right now, Lindsay?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So this is a few slides that we put together just to guide us so that there's a little bit of structure to what we're doing with an openness to you to please, we invite you to join us and to think with us. But Art, now you want to say a few words and then we'll move on.
Well, I'm just delighted to be with you, and we're very much interested in thinking and thinking about thinking. So yes, let's go for it.
And Benna, I know on your first slide, you generously indicated Montessori schools, and many of our folks here in the presentation today are from Montessori schools. However, I have to tell you that I was familiar with habits of mind way before I ever became a Montessori principal. So I just would like to encourage everyone here today that these are strategies to implement in all schools. Montessori schools are a great place to use these strategies, but really these are universal for all kinds of schools.
Well, thank you, Lindsay, because I thought we were specifically speaking to Montessori school leaders. And this is definitely our practice is universal. It's been across the world, and people of all kinds of schools and all kinds of ways of thinking. So thank you for clarifying it. As soon as we're off, I'll make that edit.
Thank
And
you.
here's where we are today. So, Art, you want to get us started?
Uh, sure. What we're going to do during this presentation is, of course, to focus on thinking. That will be with us throughout all of it. And more specifically, we want to take a look at the habits of mind. What are they? What do they do for you, and why are they important? We'd like to talk about how do we apply habits of mind in the classroom and elsewhere, and what can we do to build a school culture or a community culture around the habits of mind, that becomes our focus, our practice, and our belief.
So the way we try to structure this, so that just so you get the idea here, is for each section that we're having, I put a little square around it so that you would know that's what we're talking about now. So those are kind of transition slides. And when we talked about thinking, the focus on thinking, one of the questions that we were raising was, well, why today are we suddenly getting so many requests and interests in the habits of mind? In the past, many people would say, well, these are good things, but I'm not sure we have time for them. In other words, we might not have time to think. Unfortunately, we're in school, we're doing our learning, but chop, chop, we've got to get it done. And we said, well, let's just remind you that the future of work today is so oriented now around the habits of mind that we're having a mind shift. We're really realizing that human capital is of the greatest importance in a high-tech world. And so we have to keep asking ourselves, if human capital is so important, and we know that, for example, just as one example of technology, if we know that AI is a large language model, and what it does best is to take what we have put into that and try to show us something that gives us some sense making out of it, but we can't do it without our minds engaging in whatever it is that we're learning from the technology. So human capital is terribly important. And at the same time, we're sensing a need for a sense of well being. We're finding that our social relationships after the pandemic, how much we saw was changing as a result of the fact that when we lived in isolation, our well being was greatly challenged because of our need to be with one another. That mental health is an issue right now, an issue across the board, not just in schools, but across the board. Continuous learning, the idea that we, no matter what we are learning today, we are unlikely it will be sufficient for tomorrow. So, how do we continue to learn and be at the same time adaptable? Adaptable to all new kinds of skills, new kinds of situations. Daniel Pink, who is a very, who's a very fine author, has said it this way. It takes a different kind of person with a very different kind of mind today. And that mindset is creators, empathizers, pattern recognizers, meaning makers. Notice how conceptual we are becoming, as opposed to just doing the portal of the linear data that we get. Now we're being asked, how do we make sense out of all this that's coming at us? Daniel Pink says that very well. And we then begin to ask the question, well, what does this mean to us as we're learning in a more contemporary world? And what we see is, first, that it used to be that we would say problem solution. Unfortunately, right now, we may say posing problems may be one of the greatest strengths that we can have. Knowing the kinds of questions to ask, knowing the kinds of situations and how to really raise questions around them. However, often they're messy problems, meaning they're not easily solved, but we can engage with them and we can begin.
Of where you're going to have.
What?
Sorry, please continue.
Oh,
Was
growing,
it said? Go ahead,
growing.
Ben.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Tim?
My computer suddenly started talking.
Oh, sorry. I get it. You know, I'm talking about how the computer is not as important as we are, and it's saying, hey, wait a minute. Um, Growing intolerance for reflection. I'm finding that people say that they need to understand that the reflection period is really a greatest period for us, that we have to really be able to take our attention and reflect upon what we're learning. that there's a dizzying amount of information, and that struggling on what really matters is really important, making sense of humanity and human nature. So, all of this is just to say we all recognize all these things. How are we adapting to it? And this, again, is one of the central ideas that we are trying to think about today. Art, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I think we are all born with a deep feeling of relationship with other people. In other words, cooperation is something that is innate within us. We may have to learn how to do it well, but working with other people, relating to others, interacting with others is a human drive that I think most all of us have. And as a result, we combine into communities, which is a place where we can use these feelings, where we can go to have feelings of trust and warmth and value and feeling safe. So it's very important that we not only stimulate the cooperation, but also to create an environment in our schools or in our homes or in our communities where people feel safe to share their feelings and to express their feelings and to be understood by others. The most important part of it is to build that understanding where we know how to relate to and we know how to listen to and we know how to help construct a community where we are all working together that builds cohesiveness, a place where we can interact, and a place where we can continue to learn.
So that's the why. That's our focus on thinking. It's why we believe that this is such important work at this time. The second is that we wanted to explore the habits of mind so that there was some understanding of why we consider them to bring about more powerful thinking. So, one of the questions that we often hear is what we ask when we ask teachers about their students. Art, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, think about that yourself. As you think about your students, what is it about them that makes you think that they need to learn how to think, that they need to learn how to cooperate, they need to work together and build communities together? And so think about what your students say. Do they complain? Do they say, he never listens to me? Or uh, he's stupid? Or someone else, they put people down, that they somehow feel that they need to uh, consider themselves in first place, whereas they need to see themselves as a member of a community. So uh, students need to show common courtesy. They need to have a sense of self-control. Do your students have a sense of self-control? Ben, I think let's put up the next slide. Yeah. Do they know how to engage with other people? Can they listen? Can they contribute? Do they feel like they are making a contribution? Do they are they able to listen to and understand and accept another person's point of view? Do they know what their own role is in a community or a group? Do they know how their actions interfere with or contribute to another person? Are they aware of their own attention giving? Do they realize that now my mind has wandered, for example, I need to get back on task? And so the students need to be caught up in their own self-awareness and ready to be self-regulated, if you will. They need to know how to maintain their curiosity, how to keep their attention, how to mindfully monitor themselves, know when they are getting off task, know when they need to get back on task, and how to make that happen. So all of those are self-awareness behaviors that we want students to acquire for themselves. Does our teaching help students become more aware of their own actions, of their own feelings, of their own beliefs? Taking care of yourself is one of the most important behaviors that we can help students learn, because they're going to go through life needing to be aware of themselves and how they're interacting with others.
And it's really interesting that when we say that, we're also interested in the idea of what about us? How are we doing as educators? How are we, in fact, saying, if that's really important for our students, am I able to manage myself? I mean, a lot of what that said was about executive function. And I think we are often executives, but I don't know how well we function in the sense of, do we remember all these things? How do we make sure? And one of the things that I think is interesting that Art and I have actually written a book around is the idea that leadership is not a position, it's a set of behaviors, it's a set of skills. And what we're trying to do is encourage and distribute leadership. The more we consider it isolated in one place, the less we have the perspectives that we need, the less we have the invitation to think about multiple ways of looking at things, the less we are able to adapt because we keep a narrow band of who we are, and it is our identity as leaders rather than our identity as people who behave with leadership skills. So then, if we believe that anyone could be a leader with that, when a teacher asks a question, a teacher is actually functioning as a leader. Then are you using the kinds of skills that really suggest that? Or do you ask a question and also know the answer rather than curious about the kinds of answers that you get? When an administrator invites co-creation and suggests that, for example, this is a problem that needs to be solved, and we as a group may need to solve it, then can the administrator also invite leadership so that it's not necessarily, since I'm calling it together, I'm the natural leader of what takes place. But sometimes natural leadership just emerges as a fine set of behaviors. When a student facilitates a discussion, sometimes a student running a Socratic seminar is able to show that leadership of facilitating, asking good questions, getting students to agree. And all of it depends on the situations that you observe and where you think those powerful, thoughtful skills might be. So, what we'd like you to do is if you just take a moment and enter in the chat, what are some situations that you observe where people could use more powerful, thoughtful skills, where you would like to see that the situation calls for more powerful skills, more thoughtful skills? So if you will, just Joe, go into the chat and let's just look to see some ideas that you might have. So Cheryl is saying low test scores in public school. And that's something, Cheryl, that you're thinking is a place where we might actually develop leadership skills. What are some other situations? Anybody want to add in? Oh, here's Lisa saying, in situations when you're dealing with a child who is struggling to regulate, that's when you're really going to need these very important skills of how do you communicate? How do you see that as a problem that you can co-create the answer to? Any others that we want to just add in?
Oh, we see Allison and Kelly just dropped some ideas.
Okay. So, Allison, the delivery and communication, important. What you say, how you say it, how you're communicating it. And when someone is using the copier and it gets broken. So we can add as we go along. But what I'd like you to do is just take a look now at the habits of mind. And what we're interested in here is for you to just look at these. They are essential behaviors for a human-centered culture. And
Mhm.
essential behaviors because only human beings can actually have and develop these skills. So when we say that, let's just think for a moment. You said where you think the situations for leadership skills might exist. As you look at this chart, just put in the chat one habit that you would say for students, boy, I really wish they could develop that habit, and it would bring more of their capacity as leaders, as people who can take the executive function. And one habit for teachers or for educators. I'm asking you to choose one so that you look at the entire chart and struggle with the fact that it's awfully hard to choose just one. But if you could choose just one, which would it be? And just put that in the chat. One for students, one for teachers or educators.
Ben, while our participants take a minute to think about this, I so appreciated the habits of mind as a school leader. This is something when we implemented habits of mind at my school, we started the year before with our teachers. We did workshops with our teachers, with our parents at the school to get everyone on board and to start building those muscles, those habits of using habits of mind. It doesn't come overnight. And it made me chuckle a little bit when I see managing impulsivity, because that is one that my husband used almost daily here at home when our children were teenagers. I can't tell you how many times I heard him say to our kids, please manage your impulsivity. Um, this really became, such a valuable tool for us as parents and school administrators. So I see we're getting lots of examples coming in the chat now.
Okay, let's just take a look. Okay, so we have lot. One habit for students taking responsible risks, because when they're willing to try new things, that often helps us here and test them out, see whether we can share our thinking, allow ourselves to not always be right, but on the other hand, to learn when we're not. Be curious, listening with understanding and empathy, thinking about your thinking. What really is exciting to see, as I see all of these here, is the one thing that we can say for sure. There is no one right best answer. Many of these apply. And that's one of the reasons why we ask you to kind of just explore this, because you can see how important they all are and how difficult it is if you don't at least focus on one as a way of beginning. So
And
as
I would add too, Benna, that they can be somewhat, at least for me, situational,
Mhm.
right? So I might use a certain skill, a habit of mind in one situation where I might not use that same skill, like finding humor, for example. Um, in the moment, it might not be appropriate for me to find humor in the situation if it's something that's, a safety issue. Maybe we can laugh about it after the fact, but in that moment, I might want to be monitoring my thinking about thinking, and being flexible, right? Thinking flexibly as I try to solve the situation. But knowing that we have these skills is so important, and practicing those as we go.
And what I'm noticing as I'm listening to you, Lindsay, now that we know that, you've been using them for a while, is you have what I would call great fluency with them, which means that you know that when you're doing one, you're often doing three.
So
Because
true.
if you are really, as you suggested, if you are really trying to manage your impulsivity at the same time, you're also trying to remain open to continuous learning. You're trying to listen and you're trying to be more flexible in your listening. So a lot of them work and cluster together. So I think that that basically is part of our message, which is when you're doing one, you may need to focus to learn and become more skillful with it. But that eventually the language, as you share the language in your culture, you begin to have a communication. As your husband would say to your children, come on, can't you just manage your impulsivity? In which case they knew what he was saying
That's right.
comes a
Uh,
communication communication and a shared language. Go ahead, Art.
I think what's important here too is that we get kids and ourselves to be conscious and aware of our own thinking processes. It's one
Yes.
thing to say to someone else, you're acting impulsively, but it's another thing for the person to realize that they themselves are acting impulsively. So all of these thinking skills are not only what we observe in others, but what we observe in ourselves. We want students and ourselves to take charge of these thinking skills and to use them appropriately. So self-awareness is the first step. What do I find myself doing? Am I asking questions? Am I thinking flexibly? Am I managing my impulsivity? Am I striving for accuracy? So it's the self-awareness that we're trying to build as well as awareness of each other.
Hmm. Yes, and it's so powerful for our students to build these skills as well.
Exactly.
Starting with maybe a few habits with our first graders. But I know for our fifth graders, by the time they'd been using the habits of mind for 3 or 4 years, they could recite these
Yeah.
habits of mind as well. And our teachers all had, and I was in a traditional school where we were using habits of mind, a traditional public school, but every classroom had a copy of the chart on the wall. We didn't have this fancy chart. We had the original chart. And the kids loved to go to the chart and point to a strategy. We actually cut them apart too, and kids had their own deck that they could review. I was at a Title I school, and I really think that for our students, this direct instruction in the skills was so critical. We can't assume that students will be able to name these habits of mind independently of having some overt discussions around these strategies and these skills.
Well, and that's a very important point that you're making is that we observe kids over time, and that over time, during that time, they move from being aware of these thinking skills from the outside, like their parents or their teachers reminding them or reminding each other, to one moving, internalizing it so that they are self-regulating. We want
Mhm.
kids to manage their own impulsivity. Now, we start by raising that question with us, using the vocabulary and so on. But ultimately, the goal is to self-control and self-manage all of these behaviors themselves.
That's right. And I'm sure you're going to get to this. I'm such a habits of mind fan, but for us, we saw huge reductions in discipline referrals. We saw reductions in days missed from school, not only in our students, but also in our staff. People were generally more satisfied in the school environment and the school culture once we had habits of mind implemented in our school, and we were building that culture around these common shared goals and strategies for how we behave in the environment and the way that we treat one another. In Montessori schools, we often talk about grace and courtesy. And yet, sometimes we assume that children and adults know how that looks and how to behave in those ways, and that's not the case. You know, the habits of mind really are such a powerful tool. And I'll let you get back to it. I'm just
Love
a big
this.
fan,
Oh, we love
and
it.
I could, just say wonderful things about habits of mind all day, but
Well, you're just making all the points that, of course, are dear to our heart because we see this in so many places. But let us not forget that they're good, but they can easily become a labeling system if you don't know how to really embrace them and embed them in your actions. So it's easy enough to say, for example, as a classroom teacher, today we're going to be working on a new project, And I'm going to ask for any questions that you might have. And then to look at your watch, get impatient, think the bell's going to ring, and cut it off so that you get two questions and you stop. So then the question is, how do I create the real mindset within myself that says, I am truly curious about the questions you have to ask? That really is something I'd like to invite. So, what we're going to do is we're going to try to give you a scenario. We think it's like typical. We see this in many different places. So, we assume you can relate to it. But if you can't, you can certainly find one of your own. But this would be a scenario. Just take a moment to read this to yourself. So, as I suggested to you, you may have a situation of your own. If this doesn't match up, it's fine. Find one of your own. What I want you to do is pay attention to how we're going to show you how you might choose a habit to give yourself that intention, because it's an intention that you have. And we're going to suggest that when you have a difficult problem and a difficult conversation to have, one of the intentions you might have is to be listening with understanding and empathy. So let's just talk now about that. If you are deliberately having the intention that when I enter into this difficult situation, I'm going to first breathe. I'm going to have what I would call listening readiness. I'm going to be ready for this. And I'm actually going to try my best to intentionally focus on listening that will invite that person's thinking. So, Art, why don't you pick up with this?
Yes. Um, Here are some things that you might want to think about and do for yourself to get yourself into a listening frame of mind. First of all, you need to pause. And I'm not talking about pausing your actions, but also pausing your mind, pausing your lips, pausing your intentions. First thing to do is to take charge of yourself, clear your mind, be able to give your mind over to another person. Make sure that it is clear and open to receive. You are a good listener if you can paraphrase what you have just heard the person saying. So after pausing, see if you can sum up what the other person has said. In other words, here's the problem that I'm hearing you relate to. Here's the situation that I think you're in. From what you are saying, here is what you need to do in order to think more clearly. And then pose some clarifying questions. What might you do about this? Help me understand what you mean by. Give me an example of. All of those are ways that you can clarify the question. And we cannot express any more powerful than the need to listen. When you are listening to another person, and I don't mean just casually listening, I mean giving your attention over to another person, clearing your own mind so that you can really understand what they're saying. This is the greatest thing that you can do for another person. It's often said that listening is another way of saying, I love you, that we are giving love to another person when we are taking on that ability to listen, to pay attention to them, to give them our undivided attention, and to understand what they are talking about. This is a very difficult task for many of us in our fast-paced world. So it means that you have to practice the listening skill, clearing your own mind, so to in order to take on another person's beliefs or feelings or problems. So pausing, paraphrasing that you're understanding them to say, and then clarifying to make sure that you understand what they have said. Those are strategies that we can use to know that we are thinking. Stop and think. before you say something.
And then when you're paraphrasing, try to remember to use the key words that the person's used. Don't start giving an interpretation of what they're saying. And what we're finding is so interesting with paraphrasing is when you take the time as a listener to paraphrase, it often helps you to defuse their being defensive about what you think they think you're thinking. So just remember that this is a reciprocal relationship. When you're listening to someone with that kind of diligence and intensity, they're wondering, what is it that you're thinking? Are you judging me? Are you thinking that I've really done something I shouldn't, said something I might not have? So when you paraphrase, you're affirming, I am really just trying to understand what you're saying and how you're thinking. When I give you the key words, when I'm monitoring my own thinking and allowing myself to remain open-minded to what you're saying, that becomes very important, and it is communicated through your body, through your mind, and through your heart.
When we are listening to another person, we try to reflect back what they are saying. And it's very important that we use language that invites openness. And what we mean by that is that you use plurals. What are some ways that we can respond to help kids? What might be some different ways of ordering our language and thought processes? What could be, notice the tentative language, could, should, would, might, and be some way. So what are some ways that we could listen to children that opens up their minds and invites us in? Plurals and active language is the way that we can probe to get other people to think more deeply.
So enter into the chat. What did you observe about these strategies, these suggestions that might be helpful to start solving a problem like the one we presented, or perhaps the one that you thought of? Okay, Michelle, thank you for getting us started. Michelle is saying, I would like to ask the teacher if they wanted to talk and then just listen. So you go first. You tell me how you're thinking. Don't let me ask you what's going on here. Paraphrasing so that they know you're really listening, giving back to them a lot of what they're saying. Thank you, Lisa.
I think using these habits were so powerful in my role as a school leader when I had difficult conversations, whether it was with parents, staff members, community members, students, and helping my middle schoolers use these tools in working through difficulties that they were having with their classmates. Such a game changer.
So let's just now think about that, because it seems to me that what we're saying is they're as good for the little ones as they are for us as adults. And isn't this funny that you mentioned this, Lindsay, as one of the activities? And this is one from Red Hill Lutheran School. And this is a group of children where they cut, and by the way, the fancier icons that we have are because we made them more child-centered. And so the kids just love these. So you see that she now is holding up this card. And I just thought we'd show you a little bit of this. It's such a beautiful example. These are the kindergarten children, and they're all talking about the habits of mind.
Be safely. Even about me. Doing something. Yeah, it's doing something. Thanks.
So you can see how what a beautiful thing these children are doing and how they're beginning to really look at this question of, how lovely it is. I love that moment when she hugs him because he got,
Yes.
it was just like, oh my.
Wow,
That's
that was
excellent.
beautiful.
So we can just keep remembering they're as good for adults as they are for kids. They're as good for kids as they are for us as adults. We're all learning together how to be in a culture with habits of mind in which we all pay attention intentionally to how we behave, how we share our thinking, how we speak with one another. So we're just going to take you on this last little piece, which is building this culture because it doesn't happen overnight, as you said, Lee, and it doesn't happen at all at once forever because life is so changing so rapidly that what we're learning how to do is to use these to manage the kinds of things that we are feeling right now. So, Art, you want to walk through this?
Mastering the habits is like a journey, and we think that journey takes time, takes effort, takes practice, takes consciousness. And so one place is to begin, as you see in this little bridge, is to start with meanings. What does it mean to listen with understanding and empathy, for example? What does it mean to manage your impulses? What does it mean when we say that we are interacting with other people? What does that? What do we do when we are in situations that demand that? So the first step is just to find out what the habits of mind mean, and what do they look like? What do they sound like? How do I know whether I'm using them or not? And then the next step is to expand those capacities, to practice them, to get better at them, to see situations in which they could be used and which using them would help the situation become even more effective. Then becoming increasingly alert to situations that demand it. How about when parents talk with kids? How about when teachers talk with parents? How about when teachers talk with the school principal? How about when the principal talks with the superintendent? All of those are situations in which listening, managing impulse, asking questions, all of those important behaviors come into play. We all can use them and get better at them over time. And then, of course, um, looking at the values. What value is it when we truly listen to each other? It is also saying that truly listening is another word for making love, for loving another person, is when we listen to them, when we empathize with them, when we pay attention to them, when we give over all of our attention to them. And this is how we build commitment, is how we build communities. And we want our schools, not just the classrooms, but we want our entire schools and our communities to be places where people can trust each other because they listen to each other, because they practice the habits of mind.
It's so interesting, Art, but every time I see this bridge, it always reminds me of our work at Furr High School in Houston, Texas, which was a
Yes.
very difficult inner city school. And we worked with a very exceptional school leader, Dr. Bertie Simmons. Anyway, what we found was one of the things that they decided that they would do was the guidance counselors got so excited about being able to use this as a language with the students. And so they created a special room in the school that they called the Thinkery. And the Thinkery had a little old-fashioned antique sign on it. And it was if you needed to do a little thinking, you could come into the Thinkery. And what they found was that the students would come in and they would say, My teacher just sent me down here to come to do some thinking with you because I really am not managing myself very well. One student said, I've been asked to come down here to think with you because I'm always coming late to class. And the teacher wants to know, why am I coming late to class? And I've got to come and I've got to talk with you about it. So they've had a discussion, and the counselor said, okay, let's look at the chart of the habits of mind. Tell me what it is that's going on. First, I'm going to listen to you with understanding and empathy. Tell me, why is it that you find that you are coming late to class? And the student said, I have to get my little brother ready for school. I'm responsible for that. By the time I do that, his bus comes a little later than my bus. Then I have to get my bus. And by the time I get to school, I'm just late. And I just can't figure out how to do anything else. So the guidance counselor said, well, maybe there may be some ways to solve this problem. So let me just talk it through. Look at the chart and tell me which of these habits might be most helpful for you. So she studied it and she looked and she said, creating, imagining, and innovating. So the guidance counselor was rather surprised. She said, well, that's interesting. So she said, tell me, why do you choose that one? Tell me about that. And so the student said, well, the truth is, when the alarm clock rings, I don't really get up. I kind of snooze and go back to sleep a little. And I think what I need to do is be more creative about how am I going to make that alarm work for me so I get up? Because then I'll have a better chance of being ready when the bus comes and ready to go when I have to do it. So listen to that. Would you ever have imagined if you were just giving advice that that's the advice you would have given that student? But the invention of it was just so beautiful because she had that self awareness. That's one of the things that we keep seeing over and over again. It's when we realize that. And then the teachers often realize that. They realize something like, I need to be managing my impulsivity instead of rushing things. I need to be able to calm down. I know that when I say, for example, I remember that one teacher said, when we make transitions, we have a terrible time. Well, what would help you tell us, show us, how do you make transitions? And she said, let's go to another place. And so we all talked about, well, what does communicate? Does that communicate more excitement or calmness and peaceful transition? And we all thought it through together. And that was when the teacher realized I need to catch myself and be a little bit more patient with this. Give them time to make a transition before I just get them moving and going to the next place. So there's so much in this that is about becoming just more of the kind of human being you would like to be. We show the aspirations of the way the teachers talked about the aspirations for the children. We showed you the educators and their aspirations for what they wanted to see. And I think we all aspire to be the kind of people that the habits can help us to become. But Art and I think, would be very remiss if we didn't tell you we're still learning how to manage our impulsivity. We're still learning how to listen with understanding and empathy. We're still reminding ourselves that, it's great to listen with understanding and empathy when you agree with someone, but now we're being challenged by people who we really don't agree with. And what do we need to bring to bear so that we're able to do that? And I think that that's part of what we're really telling you as our story is remaining open to continuous learning is a life skill.
It's a lifelong skill. You never master it, but you're always trying to get better at it. There's always room for improvement. We can always self-manage ourselves and look back upon a behavior or an opportunity and say, well, did I use my habits of mind? If not, what could I do differently? If I did use them, what effect did they have? So being aware of our own use of the habits of mind is a place to begin.
So I just put this up for the website so that you would know that you can find out more about the habits of mind. But also, Lindsay, I'm happy to send you this whole slideshow so that you can give it to anyone who came or anyone who can make use of it.
That's
That would be
great.
fabulous.
We'll
Yeah.
be
Thank you so much, Benna. And I just think of all the different examples that I use these skills, in dealing with difficult situations. And it was as much to my own benefit as it was to the person I was interacting with, in that it helped me, take some deep breaths, keep my blood pressure low, and be much more successful as a school leader and as a parent as well, and as a friend, just in all the aspects of my personal and professional life. And it also reminded me of a situation that a friend of mine was telling me about. She'd uh, been using some of the habits of mine. She was a new principal at her school, and she had a neighbor who'd been coming and complaining every day about the trash that the kids were leaving in front of the school. And she was saying to me, how frustrated she was. And so we kind of laughed about it a little bit. And then we said, well, what about those habits of mine? Maybe we could use it. And so she and I brainstormed some strategies to really listen deeply, because this neighbor had been coming so many days in a row that she just wasn't listening anymore. My principal friend. And so after a few days, she called me back and she said, I used those listening skills that we were discussing, those habits of mind. And I said, really? Well, what happened? Well, she explained that really at the root of it all, the neighbor had shared how her own children had attended the school many decades before, and how really she wished she had more connection to the school. And it ended up that this neighbor decided to volunteer with their environmental club, and actually started an after school program with the kids to help pick up trash, and became one of their superstar volunteers. And it really, I think we miss opportunities to connect and create a better world when we forget. I'm pointing to myself, when we forget to stop, make that time, that important pause, and focus on the individual, and deeply listen and share that caring about them. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your gift to the world, the habits of mind. Um, it's such a wonderful, wonderful way to approach life, and to build peaceful, but high functioning communities and schools.
Thank you for providing this opportunity to allow us into your classroom there and into your school. And we wish you the very best success.
Thanks very much. So it's asking for, okay, I see, Benna, you've already typed in the habits of mind, the website. See some folks
Yep.
asking for that. I'll drop it in for everyone again. Tim?
Ben, I'm sure over the years you and Arthur have run professional development for school leaders and their faculty. Can you talk to me about what the Institute is doing these days for schools that want to implement this and aren't already using it?
Yes. Oh, so glad you asked. Um, yeah, we have a program that we started. We used to go out to schools and do a lot of the work on site. And I'm sure you're well aware of the fact that this is a much more limited opportunity these days. And so during the pandemic, we got clever and we said, okay, this is the push for us to really see if we can embrace something different that might work. And so Art and I recorded online learning. And we thought that, us dogs, we could learn some new tricks. We could be able to do it. And so we thought it was also a good idea to record some of the work that we've been doing through this venue. So we started something called the Individual Practitioner Program, and that is a series of badges. And so the first badge we call the Awareness Badge. And in that, you'll hear presentations from Art and me, but you'll also have activities. It's all online, it's all virtual. But one of the things that we learned about online learning was that if you could create a cohort, And if you could actually meet regularly on a Zoom meeting, then that would embrace more of what we were talking about. So the way it's designed is you get a 6-week course, but each time you're in, you also every week get a Zoom call that you share with the cohort. The cohort becomes so happy with each other that actually they solve each other's problems, and we keep these very small. It's usually only 10 to 15 people to a group. And so that we do. And then the awareness badge goes to the implementation badge, and then finally to the assessment badge. So we each break it up and have it that way. Now, that's just a lovely way for people to find each other, become, and one of the things that's exciting is it's international. So people from Cambodia and Singapore join us, and they're with the people from South Carolina and North Carolina. So it's a very exciting kind of community. Some people are on that Zoom call at 2 a.m., and some people are on the Zoom call at 5 a.m., and some people are on the Zoom call at 12 p.m. So it's just a variety. That's one of the big things. Then we also started doing conferences. But when we did conferences, we found that they were wonderful. But last year we had this enormous discovery, which was we had a 2-day conference, and then we had an additional 1 day if you wanted to visit one of our certified schools. And we can tell you the feedback was so strong that we wished we all could have stayed for that 3rd day because that was so important. So we decided we're going to try something new, and we're trying it this year. So we have 2 conferences. They're small. We're keeping them limited to 60 people. They're going to be in a certified school, and it's going to be an immersive experience rather than a typical session. It's going to be immersive. We're going to get to classrooms. We're going to meet with the Board of Ed. We're going to talk with the people in the community. And we're also going to find time to talk with each other and learn with each other. So one will be on the East Coast, which is in Long Island, New York. You can tell by the way I said Long Island, where I come from. And then the other will be in California. It's in Tustin, California. The little children that you just saw in that little card game, it's at that school.
Oh,
We hope that people will be able to join us. Again, we limit the number to 60 people so that we keep it small, keep it personalized, and keep it appropriately embedded in a school as an immersive experience.
and I would just remind folks, I'm looking at your website. There's only 3 seats remaining for Long Island, and there looks like a little more room remaining in California, but register right away because it does look like they fill fast.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It looks great. What a great idea. I love the idea of being immersed on a school community, on a school
Yeah,
campus,
we
in the
finally
school community. Yeah.
feel like we've
Yeah.
got people are just so eager to give their sessions that they're mad at us. Like, I want to be able to talk about this or that. We make it so that there's lots of networking and being together and
Ah, that's so wonderful.
find our ideas with each other.
That's great. Wow. Well, again, Bena and
Where are
Art.
you located? Bena, where
Oh,
I'm located in my apartment in Westport, Connecticut.
And
There you
I'm
go.
in my home and in Granite Bay, California.
oh my.
That's
It's
great.
very cold where I am. How is it, Art, where you are?
The sun is out and it's a beautiful day. Come join us.
That's
We're
right.
heading to -2 degrees.
Oh my goodness. I think I'm cold and I'm in Houston at 50. So I can't imagine -2. Yikes. Well, stay
Darn
warm.
cold.
Thanks everyone for coming. I just want to remind you that this has been a presentation of the Montessori Foundation. Lindsay Pollock, Dr. Lindsay Pollock is my co-host. Lindsay, who do we have coming up next week?
Well, I haven't gotten a confirmation yet, Tim, but I can assure you that it's going to be someone fabulous.
Well,
And I
there you
know
go.
we'll be sending out the marketing materials probably tomorrow.
Sounds great. everyone who's here and everyone who signed up or anyone that emails me at timseldon@montessori.org, we will send you the recording and the PDF of the PowerPoint that Bena is going to share. Bena and Art and Bill, thank you so much for being here with us. And Lindsay, thanks for setting this up. I really appreciate it. It's been such a pleasure to sit back and let other people do the talking. And it was a lovely conversation.
It certainly
Thank you.
was. Thanks so much. Thanks again. Y'all
Bye,
stay
everybody.
warm. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.